Hi teachers, it's Tim. Have you ever been a little unsure as to whether your student is ready to take their first exam? Preparing students for music exams can be fraught with challenges and questions like, what does the student actually need to know? What's the examiner looking for? Can I even use this piece? What are the oral tests about? And importantly, is my student actually ready? If you've ever wondered about the answers to these questions and more, then I invite you to join me for a special live event with guests Dr. Sally Cathcart and Serena Mak called Supercharge Your Grade 1 Students Workshop. It's on Monday the 13th of March at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, that's 8 p.m. London, or Tuesday the 14th of March at 7 a.m. Melbourne time. Even if you're not preparing your elementary students for exams, you're going to learn heaps from this workshop. So to sign up and save your seat, head to topmusic.co/workshop today. You're listening to the Integrated Music Teaching Podcast from Top Music. Tune in weekly as we interview music teachers and experts from around the world to explore creative activities and ideas that build learning connections in students. Our integrated music teaching approach will deepen your students' understanding of musical concepts, engage them in critical thinking, improve their reading and performance, foster their curiosity, and prepare them for a lifetime of music making. Tim Topham here, and welcome back to the Integrated Music Teaching Podcast from Top Music Co. I'm delighted that you're with us today, and thanks so much for tuning in. At the heart of integrated music teaching is the use of creative activities like composing, improvising, transposing, arranging, and playing by ear as the bridge that helps students make meaning and build connections between theory and practice in their learning. By using creativity in an integrated way, rather than as a supplementary lesson activity, we can design novel, memorable, and emotional experiences that students remember and that helps them understand the inherently connected nature of all aspects of music. To find out more about our simple 3-step IMT approach and how you can use it in your studio today, head to topmusic.co/integrated, where you can learn more about the research-informed background of the model and download a 1-page new reference sheet that we've just created so that you can try it out today. Well, it's great to be with you for another week of the IMT podcast. I can't believe it's March. Isn't that crazy? As you know, we've spent all of February exploring the good and bad of exams, and this month, we're excited to let you know about our brand new Top Music Pro course. It's the Grade 1 Teaching Toolkit, which will be immediately valuable to anyone preparing students for exams, particularly at those lower levels, even preliminary grade 1, 2, 3, and also for teachers working more generally with elementary students, because the kinds of things that we talk about in this course are all relevant to teachers wanting to prepare students at any of these younger grade levels, whether they do the exams or not. Our course creators, Dr. Sally Cathcart and Serena Mak from the Curious Piano Teachers, are specialists in this area and will be joining me for a live workshop happening in a couple of weeks. Find out all the details at topmusic.co/workshop. All right, on to today's show. I found out about my guest today, Serena, as I was researching our exam topic for this last month. And I came across a TEDx video that she'd recently delivered on the topic of exams in Australia. And I thought, all right, I think I need to chat to Serena to find out more about her background and experience and why she came to be delivering a TED Talk. And more importantly, what's she suggesting about exams in this talk? So this is episode number 319, and we've got all our show notes over at topmusic.co/episode 319. My guest today, Serena Mak, has been sharing her love for life and music with her piano students for over 18 years. Aside from managing her own private studio, she volunteers regularly at her local church as a pianist and vocalist. She has also trained other teachers in piano schools all over Brisbane, Australia. Selena pushed through exam after exam while growing up and attained her diploma in piano performance at the tender age of 13. Pretty impressive. In 2022, she took to the TEDx stage and unravelled the problem of traditional assessment-focused learning. She is passionate about sharing ideas on how we can nurture the next generation of musicians amid the changing landscape of music education. Welcome to the show, Serena Mak. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Tim. It's great to be here.
So I found out about you through your recent TED Talk, which was called Exposing Music Exams and the Distinction Delusion. Now, we're going to get to that and unpack it in just a moment. But before that, I'd love for you to tell everyone a little bit about your teaching right now, your sort of where you are, firstly, your studio, your numbers, what kind of levels do you teach, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm based in Brisbane in Australia, and currently teaching about 31 students regularly, and I teach on weekdays after school from like 3 till 7:30. Most of them are school age, but my youngest is 4 and my oldest is a lovely lady in her retirement.
Very nice. And I was just commenting, for those who are listening, you won't be able to see, but Serena has this amazing pink massage chair behind. And I thought, oh, that's great for you for watching TV, but it's actually not just for you. Who else is it for?
I always tell the parents raising children is hard. So while we have the piano lesson, I'm like, please enjoy the massage chair. I'll be done with your kid in 30 minutes. See you on the other side.
Have you ever had any of them fall asleep?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm like, you better go wake up, Mum.
Oh, there you go. Nice little idea anyway. So
Yeah.
before we unpack the TED Talk and go into a little bit more detail, you've been teaching for some time and you've obviously started on a path. I mean, to go to the trouble of making a TED Talk, you obviously feel quite passionate about something. So what was the catalyst that brought about this change in thinking for you about both music teaching and exams and how they fit together?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever been super excited about exams, even growing up. Like, I like them because they gave me a lot of validation as a young girl, but they were never my favorite flavor of ice cream, if you know what I mean. And I guess in terms of milestone moments, when I started teaching, I kind of just tried to copy and paste what I got when I was learning. And I guess the logic is it worked out okay for me, so it'll work out okay for them. And yeah, actually in my early stages of teaching, I felt like there was a lot of frustration on my end and the student. There was heaps of burnout and the turnover was crazy. And I'm like, well, this can't be it. And actually in reflection, I'm thinking, oh, that's why a lot of my peers, as I was growing up, they all kind of like fell away from the good path. Because yeah, it's really not like a one size fits all thing for everyone. And I guess that's what I've been trying to figure out, is there an alternative option in my last near 2 decades of teaching? I think the big catalyst, to answer your question, towards wanting to do the TED Talk, I think we all kind of know there's like things in the system that don't really work, but it's like, oh, well, what are we going to do? What's the alternative? But after the pandemic years, when everyone was, I guess the whole education system around the world just got chucked into the washing machine. And I thought, if there's a time for people if there's a time for people to be open to something new, something different, and they actually have the technology, I think, because, there was a lot of people who had to, if they didn't, they had to upgrade so they could keep up with school. I'm like, hey guys, we might actually have what we need to do something different, to try something different. So yeah.
There are some new opportunities opened up for sure. And I think there are a lot of positives that came out of the pandemic for music teachers in just opening up doors to possibilities, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, I'm totally on the same page with regard to exams. I mean, exams have their place, and I don't want this to come across as we're bagging exams, because exams
are definitely not.
And as you say, they provide lots of validation, they provide milestones, they provide motivation for some students. It's that the old school way that we were both taught, probably, that you go through exam after exam, that is the problem, and that every student is expected to do that. And I think that's where the problem is. And I tend to call this a linear teaching approach, which really kind of just goes, okay, in a lesson, we're going to learn piece 1 and then piece 2 and piece 3 and do some scales and then go home and come back and then do the same thing. And as a bigger picture, overall, you're going to do grade 1 and then grade 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And you've just got this linear plane with very little interconnection, very little depth. And that's why I talk a lot about what I call integrated music teaching, where we focus on trying to bridge connections between these musical elements and concepts during lessons as much as possible. And so moving the theory into the practice as well. So you're not doing, I bet you probably did the Dulcie Holland books, and, you went over to the table, or you went away from your instrument. The memories are coming back. You went away from your instrument and sat at a table to do your theory. It was just completely disconnected.
I think a lot of kids are like, why are we doing this?
Right, yeah. And do you feel like that the rushed or that sort of linear progression, and I've called it the exam express before, is another limiting factor to this way of teaching?
Oh, 100%. I think if you think about it, exams by nature, they have to be limited, just to be fair, we have to limit what we're testing, and it all has to be very, like cookie cutter is probably not the right way to describe it, but, it has to be standardized and that in itself is limiting. But, how else are we going to keep it fair? So we're trying to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. It just kind of sucks if, you don't like fruit. So, yeah, I think, it's definitely something in reflection, like it doesn't work for everyone. But I think also early on in my teaching years, like you just don't know, like you think this isn't working, but I don't know what else to try, because you only really know what you were given. But I do think nowadays more and more teachers are just exploring different things. And I think that's great, just to have those conversations and we can help each other with like different ideas, what works for you, what doesn't work. And yeah, that's how we can kind of help that next generation. And I guess you were talking about how there's that linear approach to learning. And I've thought about this for a long time because I guess linear in itself isn't a terrible thing. Like we do want progress, we want clarity. And I think that's why like a lot of parents love the grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because they don't know what, tone and technique and they don't know what's going on. So it's helpful for them to know that, oh, yes, I'm paying the money and there's progress, kids are achieving and things like that. But I think the linear approach is dangerous because what happens often is that, like if you imagine a graph and it's like this one very thin pencil line of progress. And then you think about the rest of the like the white space. That's like the uncharted territory of our music education. And yeah, it's like, yeah, it was really fast for you because you missed out on so much stuff around. And because not everyone wants to walk that particular pencil line, yeah, that's why we have all this turnover with kids that stop piano and they're like, oh yeah, I hate piano now. I'm like, no one hates piano. You just didn't like piano exams, yeah. So I think if we just try to aim, I guess in my teaching, I'm trying to like, I still want upwards progress, but like lots of little lines all over the graph. And so I think when you talk about the integrated music approach, it's kind of like, we want to connect more points. And so if we have more lines, then we can plot more meaningful connections between things. But if you're only ever just going to do list A, list B, list C, list D, then it's not connected to anything. Even the theory exams that come with it, or like, sometimes the ear tests and all that, it's like, why am I doing this? I'm like, you just got to do it so you get your piece of paper. And the kids know, like, okay, I'm just playing the game. And, I like to be upfront with it if we're doing it. So I'm not trying to like trick them, like scam them into something they didn't sign up for. Yeah.
It's a funny kind of situation because this has sort of been built into piano pedagogy over so many years, and the exam boards are kind of these big mighty organisations, both here in Australia and also even more so in England. I think one of the other benefits has come out of the last 2-3 years, but actually more like the last 5 to 10 years is even if you just look at the exam boards, there are probably 3 times the options that there were when we went through. So even if you are quite passionate about exams and you think and you feel that's the right thing for your students and they agree, then you don't always have to go with the one board that you were brought up with. There are so many options now. And you also have, of course, the repertoire exams, and you've got video exams and online and in person. I mean, there's so much variety, isn't there? Have you explored some of those other options, or do you tend to stick to the one that you know?
Yeah, no, I think I do. Like over time, I jump from board to board as they come up with new syllabi. And yeah, like I did the traditional Amy B ones growing up, and I think they're very helpful. And I think it actually helps to make sure teachers are teaching like a wide range of things instead of just, okay, let's do this. But then they just weren't, I feel like they were fine for when I was a child and, there was no internet and less distractions. But now kids are so busy. Like they literally have no time to go to the toilet. You know what I mean? And, like, I don't know how they can juggle all that with all their other just school and extracurricular commitments. And yeah, so I think even before our time, maybe, I don't know, in the really, really olden times when your family had to sell the family cow and your sister to afford piano lessons, then yeah, you're going to dedicate your whole life to practicing 10, 12 hours a day. But kids don't do that nowadays. And those traditional exams don't really fit the mold of the modern student. And so, like, yeah, I've been doing the repertoire exams and I still teach technique and, exercises, but I feel like because they're not an accessible item, what we need to juggle in preparation for an exam is just more realistic. And if that means more kids can keep progressing, then I'm definitely for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's added a lot of flexibility in approach, I think, too. And yeah, taken away some of that. I remember the grade 8 AMEB technical work requirements back before they changed them. So going back 10 years, I mean, they were enormous. The number of scales and arpeggios, everything you need to know. I mean, that was half your practice was just getting to grips with those, let alone your difficult pieces. So I think it's really to the exam board's credit that they have gone and offered these other approaches for students. I think that's really, really useful. And teachers should really investigate and explore both the different options for each of the boards, but also, as you said, the different boards themselves. One thing in your TED talk, you mentioned rather than looking at exams as here's what you should teach, here's a curriculum, you likened it to a body temperature test, which I hadn't heard before. I thought that was great. Could you explain that?
You hadn't heard it before. I took it from a quote from one of the interviews you did. So
I think I've got too many interviews to remember.
Yeah, fair point. So actually, I did write it down to make sure I don't misquote someone. But it's a quote that I got from an interview that you did before with Tim Arnold, who's the executive director of global operations for ABRSM, which is a really famous examination board. And the quote is, "An exam is a syllabus, not a curriculum. A curriculum is a plan of action for a year, whereas a syllabus is a measure of your temperature at any one point in time." So I think my logic there is that, you can get some insight about your health at a certain point in time when you take your temperature, but it really doesn't tell you everything about your health. It's silly to make big claims about your health, just based on a metric like a body temperature. No one eats clean and trains hard just to show off their body temperature. And yeah, I think it's like in a similar vein, good exams don't automatically make you a good musician. It just reflects like one area of what it means to be a good musician. But it's interesting because when you look at, the real world, I can wave my diploma and people are just like, "Oh, wow, you're amazing." Like, you haven't even seen me touch a piano, let alone heard me play. But apparently I'm like God tier on the piano. So yeah, and I think that's really sad because music is, the music is being discounted, disregarded. And we just look at the paper, which is, I think, helpful, but it's a helpful shortcut. Like if you're interviewing or auditioning and just sifting through 1,000 applicants. Yeah, okay, paper's good, but eventually you got to come in and audition. You got to actually play the thing, So yeah, I think the exams can be very just one vein of what it is to be a musician. Not everyone that loves music is going to be a performer, but that's what exams kind of are geared towards, I think, being like concert level pianist. And I mean, I don't know any off the top of my head, no concert pianists on my speed dial. So there's actually not a lot out there, if you know what I mean, but we train them all like they're going to be that. So, yeah.
I call it the 99% versus the 1%. There's probably, I'd probably be less than 1%. Oh, actually, no, let's give it a bit more flexibility. Let's say 2 to 3% of your studio, they don't want to be concert pianists. I don't know of any student I've ever taught who had that as an aspiration, but maybe they are really geared up for hardcore exams, learning all the repertoire, getting really, really good, doing all the technique, practicing hard. Maybe 2% of your studio max, I'd say. So what are we doing to appeal to the 98%ers? That's what it comes down to for me. And that percentage has, I think the 2% was probably maybe 20%. 20 years ago. And I think that's just, as you say, kids are different now. They can barely have time to go to the toilet. They have all of these other competing activities. They have much more fun things to do, like play video games and use their phones. So how are we appealing to the 98%ers?
Yeah, that's it. And I think those 2 to 3%, what I found in my experience in teaching is they reveal themselves quite easily, quite naturally. So they will ask you, like, when can I do an exam? And my friends are doing, I think that's another dangerous thing we should be aware of. Often the kids want to do exams because other kids are doing it. And, as mature adults, I'm like, that's not a great reason to do things, but it is a reason. And, I've actually like in my studio, we still do exams. So I think people will see my TED talk and they're like, oh, there's no exams here. I'm like, I still offer them, but for very specific situations, usually for like, high school entry, scholarship application. Yeah. And you can involve the kids and empower them. Like, hey, you can actually contribute to this thing that you're doing. And, we can practice towards that. There's a why. But otherwise, yeah, like you said, the 98% are like, why are we doing this? And I'm like, we don't have to do this. And I think because the world is opening up and we have so much more, like technology is a huge thing for me. And during pandemic years, I think it really struck me that, hey, we're actually like, we're here, we've arrived. And, kids scroll TikTok all day long. The currency now is video and, or even just audio. Think about like a wedding, you pay the most money to the wedding photographer. When was the last time you pulled out your wedding certificate for your friends to flex and say, hey guys, I got married? You pull out the photos, right? You pull out the videos, the memories, the things that actually kind of document what happens. And like, I think that's what makes like music more relevant for kids. And they can share the videos if they want with like friends and family. They don't have to, but even for their own private collection, just like browsing through like, oh yeah, I played that song, I really liked that. Or like, wow, I hated that one. That's really nice to look back on, but I've never felt warm, fuzzy feelings looking through my A4 display folder of certificates. You know what I mean? Like the one that sits on the wall is just all the time. Well, the one that sits on the wall, I mean, it's really for like new students walking into the studio to make sure, I'm not a dud. And again, that thing where they see diploma and they're like, oh, wow, she must be amazing. But actually, what's really important, it isn't the piece of paper. I always joke with my kids. I'm like, I got a reflex A4 ream here. What do you want? I can print whatever you want, So like, it's just paper really, it doesn't show what you can do as a musician. Yeah.
This episode is proudly supported by our newest course, Grade 1 Toolkit, which is brought to you by the Curious Piano Teachers. This course is perfect for teachers with students looking to start working towards Grade 1 exams. You will be guided through each step of the way, from assessing if a student is ready for Grade 1 to ways of teaching the pieces and technical work, and even tips on how to make the exam day the most positive experience possible. Even though this course is designed for teachers of Grade 1 students, there are plenty of tips and ideas for teachers who are not following an exam syllabus. Sally and Sharon share numerous brilliant ways of helping students improve their technical skills and show us how encouraging curiosity can help create engaging performances. Are you curious about Grade 1 exams? Join Tim, Sally, and Sharon live on Monday, March 13th, 4 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. London time, and Tuesday, March 14th, 7 a.m. Melbourne time, as they will be chatting all about exams. Register for the live workshop at topmusicco.com/workshop.
So I think you've touched on what I was going to ask you next, which was, what was the big idea? We're going to embed your TED Talk into our show notes because I saw that it was on YouTube, so I think we'll be able to do that. So that's over at topmusic.co/episode 319. But for those who haven't seen it, can you give us a bit of an overview of what you're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So the big idea with all the gimmicky words and things was the path forward for modern musicians is to go back to the core of music using current recording technology. And I guess what I'm trying to say is as an alternative to just like doing exams and seeking external validation, I think something we can all make a part of our practice is we're just recording ourselves, in all situations, not just like, recording you on the big stage, but, just in the practice room, in the lesson. And what happens over time is you create this really meaningful documentary of your own journey. And I think you can really track progress like in a more qualitative and meaningful way. And what I think long-term want to do is that I want to empower people towards like an independent and lifelong journey of learning that far exceeds just having lessons and far exceeds, the numeric graded exams. And, this is something we can continue to do. Like, as adults, what do we do as musicians? I'm not taking exams. I'm not taking lessons. But yeah, like, we can actually still enjoy music in a way that's relevant. And like, I think modeling that for the kids is really important so that they know I'm not just doing this because mum made me do it or, it makes me feel good. It's like just more things on my plate, really. But this is actually meant to be a lifelong thing. So, and I feel like everyone has a smart device. I mean, even like kids in primary school, I see them with smart devices. I'm like, well,
yeah, it's a bit of a worry.
And yeah, but like, like all things in different situations, I'm like, well, there's opportunity there, like, and I always tell some kids that the teenagers, they're like really self-conscious. I'm like, we don't have to use video. Like sometimes I'm just lazy. I would say I haven't got my face on. So just like turn on the video, but I just put it, on the stool next to my bum and I'm like, I just play it. And then you can actually listen to yourself and play back. I mean, I don't know if you do that in your normal practice, Tim, but sometimes when you're playing something particularly difficult, you're busy playing it. And then, and it might be a long piece. By the end, you're like, I know there was something that needed fixing, but I can't remember anymore. So just recording yourself, I found, was always really helpful. When I was young, we didn't have smart devices. And I always used to look at my little cassette player and I could record things off the radio, but I didn't really have the technology and the know-how to record myself. And that was something I really wanted to do. I thought it'd be helpful, but just didn't have access. But every kid has a phone in their bum and pocket and everyone can do it now. I don't know why they're not doing it. So, yeah.
I think the challenge, though, and I get what you're suggesting with regard to video. So what I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're advocating for is, yes, exams useful for certain students, pop in and out, use them as they are valuable for the student. In the meantime, why don't we take more snapshots of student progress using video as they go along? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so the challenge, that's pretty much it.
Challenge for me is how do you organize it? Because your wedding book, that was a great analogy before, you get your wedding book out, all your photos are nicely laid out, beautiful. Or you get your wedding, I was going to say video, you don't do that anymore. You get it on your hard drive or whatever, you've got a folder. How, because that's the challenge is actually organizing, because I have so many videos, as we all do, and photos, and they're all mixed up with the cats and the dogs and the babies and all that kind of stuff. How do you see that working? Because I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I notice is that, number one, our generation is different to this next generation. They actually, like, you see the youngest people on social media uploading videos, they're actually more on top of that stuff than we are. So I feel like, this is actually probably easier for them than it is for me. I do think it's a personal choice. So depending on what you want to do with it, it is helpful, I think, to make, you could just make a burner account and just call it user 172654321 or whatever. And you can upload something, keep a private account on social media. I just think it's helpful.
Or something.
You can do YouTube, even like Instagram, Facebook, or whatever the kids want to use nowadays, or whatever, is I guess natural to you. So my side hobby is not a hustle. Like I did a lot of dancing. And so piano for me, I don't like sharing my own progress videos because I see myself as a professional teacher. And if I put that up into the World Wide Web, there's a lot of like scrutiny. So I'll share with like, close friends, and like I have my own private kind of collection of things. But for something that's a hobby, like there's a lot less pressure. And so, yeah, like I'll have an account where I just post little clips of like, what I've been doing. And if you ever like scroll back far enough, you might just find this in your normal social media accounts. You scroll back far enough and you cringe and you're like, oh my gosh. But that's a great feeling because it means you must have grown. And I think that's something I've learned to appreciate over time is like, yeah, when you look back at something and think, oh, wow, I wasn't very good back then. And then like seeing your own progress. And that can be very encouraging for me to be like, just keep going. I always feel like I'm not doing great. But then I guess, there has been growth, and to think back to when I thought, oh, that part was okay. And now I'm like, no, that's not okay anymore. So for me, I think for different applications in my life, even I have different ways of organizing the files. One thing I struggle a lot with, I think, is as the teacher, as I'm trying to like, advocate for this thing, I'm trying to show the kids. So when you have to sort out your own videos, you only have to do your own. And there's only so much to deal with. When you have a studio of 31, it is a lot harder. But even then, I'm just showing them like, hey, this is something you can do. So for teachers, what I do is I have a private YouTube account that's separate to all my other things. And then I upload them into playlists, and they're all unlisted videos. So I just shared the student specific playlist.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
With the student. Yeah.
Yep.
And then they can scroll through that. And I'm just like modeling a very basic version of it. But hopefully they will kind of see what's working there and kind of evolve it in their own way. And I think the other thing is that I don't want to spoon feed them too much and be like, here's the lovely collection Miss Serena prepared for you. And then they're like, okay, cool. But they have to learn how to do it themselves, you know, and I'm always telling them and telling you should record yourself and listen to it. Did you like it? What did you think? And so the idea is that they do this outside of lessons. They don't have to share everything with me, you know, it's really for them. And so hopefully as society keeps progressing, I can't even keep up with all the social media things now, Tim. There's so many new ones. And yeah, the kids will find the one that's relevant to them and the one that kind of serves their purpose. But I don't think it has to be a public thing. It can be a public thing. It's really just a personal choice, I think. Yeah.
I think there's some good suggestions there for teachers. So that one about having a private YouTube account with playlists for each of your student, and for anyone that has, I mean, I think all the teachers listening would have a mobile phone. YouTube has an app where you can record through the app, and it will go directly to your channel. So you don't even have to worry about where do I save it, how do I upload it, and those sorts of things. So that can be a great time saver. And then you're saying you can share the link to that playlist and say to kids at 6 monthly intervals or end of the year or whatever it is, let's go back. Let's spend a little bit of lesson time and just see how far you've come this year. And that's a measure of progress using technology.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Even if when you go further back, obviously you see bigger changes. But sometimes early on in the learning process of a piece, like I'll just record them playing separate hands with like 60 beats per minute on the metronome, and it's all wrong. I'm like, don't worry about it. Just keep playing. It's fine. We're just documenting. It's not for you to, sell for money or whatever. And then like even just like 2-3 weeks afterwards when they're playing, it's something hands together or even just a little bit faster, a bit more even. And then I show them, I'm like, look, this is what we hear as teachers. But if we don't show the kids, they don't know. They're just like, I'm just going to keep practicing. I don't know what's happening. And so this is what I keep talking about, giving the kids, empowering them to, take ownership of their learning. Hey, when you practice and do this, it actually helps you to achieve this. And I think we sometimes discount that because as teachers, it's so obvious to us. But our role as teachers is to show kids how to be their teacher. I always ask them, hey, who's the teacher at home? And they're like, Mom. I'm like, no, Mum is Mum. You got to listen to Mum, but you're the teacher because Mum's not having piano lesson today. And so like, I have to use things like that to show them this is evenness, or this is, your articulation is improved, and you have to show them like, this is what it sounds like. And it can be a really helpful teaching tool. And yeah, the biggest encouragement really for them, because it's not just me showing them some textbook video, like, oh, this is what staccato sounds like. It's like, this is you playing with better articulation. Oh, this is me. And so, yeah, it's like you can actually do so much, as a musician. And that helps with all the practice and motivation and all that as well. Yeah.
It definitely helps listening back to their own playing, because I find that students will sometimes really not listen. So they could play something to me, and at the end I'll say, oh, so how did that go? Can you, score yourself out of 10 on dynamics or some specific measure? And they'll be like, I don't know. And you really find out that they're concentrating so hard on reading notes and playing things right that they haven't really listened to themselves at all. So if you've got a recording that you can play back, bang, you can chat together analytically about what actually went on. So I'm interested to know what kind of impact this has had on your studio. So you said that you started teaching, as we often do, like our teachers. So you did all the exam stuff, all your students went through it, and you changed at some point in the past. What effect has it had? How have you seen things change?
I guess I'm not really a metrics person. I'm really bad at like keeping, like tracking that kind of stuff in terms of my studio. But I feel like I don't really ever have to look for new students, because probably the biggest change is the retention. So the kids that come and then they just stay like for much longer. And whether they're doing like assessment or not, because some do and some don't, but they're here learning for much longer. And so for me as a teacher, I can teach them so much more because I've just got so many more years with them. Whereas before, they burn out so quickly and you just lose so many along the way. It's really a shame and it's such a pity. And what breaks my heart is that a lot of these kids go out into the world thinking, well, I tried piano and I'm really bad at it. You know, music's not for me. I don't like piano. They have all these like strange, and, you know, kids think these things. And if we don't walk them through that, like sometimes when I do this interesting thing where I'm going to get all this interesting feedback from teachers, but sometimes you can see there are kids who they like piano, but perhaps they don't like it enough to practice it and improve as a skill. And I'm like, that's completely fine, you know, and I want to tell them that, you know, you have the skills and ability to do this, but you don't have to want to do this. And I'm not going to force you to do it. And so if they ever do quit piano, it's like, oh, it's because I like it, but I don't like it enough to, you know, practice diligently and make enough progress each week to justify lessons. You can still enjoy, you know, music. You can still enjoy piano. But I never want kids leaving piano thinking, I suck. I'm like, you know, you don't suck. You know, that's all they think. And it's such a dampener on their confidence. And yeah, so I think definitely like in terms of the effect of my studio, the kids just learn for much longer and they're having much more fun, which is like this, you know, cycle, like a good cycle where yeah, they're just hungry for more music. And the ones that have actually finished, you know, grade 7, grade 8 piano, they're still here. And sometimes I'm like, what are you doing here? You don't really need me anymore. But they're like, yeah, I want to keep learning. Like, you know, show me other things. And I'm like, okay, let's do some duets. And I don't know, let's, you know, learn chords and let's do, because I mean, there is actually like, there's no limit to what you can learn. And I'm learning sometimes because they'll ask me to do things. I'm like, oh man, okay, Miss Serena's going to look that up, get back to you in 2 weeks. And so, yeah, it's really encouraging to see when the kids really have this sincere hunger for music. And I guess we call it passion often, which I feel like definitely in my personal experience, when I was doing exams, I didn't really have much passion for music because of the exams, because of my lessons. It didn't make me motivated. I didn't want to fail. I think that's what kept me afloat when I was younger. But that's
the
a very
thing, isn't it?
horrible. Yeah, like it's a very like you're just always standing on ice. And I think certain personalities can survive that and most don't. And that's why we have turnover everywhere.
It's that intrinsic motivation that you've been able to build, I think, which is just super critical. And seeing music and your students seeing music as more than just exams, which is well, now the whole point of the conversation. So look, in wrapping up, Serena, it would be awesome to find out a little bit about the TED story, because I know that some teachers, including me, I'll be honest, are pretty fascinated to know how you came to be doing a TEDx gig. So can you just tell us how that happened?
I guess it's probably not as glamorous and amazing as people think it is. I always have this conversation.
You get to step on the red carpet. So cool.
Oh, just get one from Fantastic Furniture, man. You stand on it every day. But I think, so like I always have this conversation with people, like not just friends, but like, you know, I go to the shops, I talk to people and they're like, oh, you're a piano teacher, because they're wondering why you're this grown adult and shopping at 10 a.m. in the morning because I don't work a normal 9 to 5. And they're like, what are you doing here? Anyway, like everyone is like, not everyone, so many people have been touched by music assessment. And yeah, most of the time they have like a really like bitter, tragic story. I'm like, oh my gosh, let me get you some tissues. I'm in the middle of Kiki I'm like, you know, counseling this young girl. So like, I feel like it's this really far reaching thing. And I wanted to start the conversation beyond the reach of what, like my social circles, my studio. So yeah, I was just having a chat with someone, like a friend, over like a coffee and telling them all my ideas about teaching. And she's like, you should like get this out there. Eh? And she had some connections to like I did TEDx UQ. And so she knew of the event. She wasn't actually part of organizing. She said, you should apply. And here's the thing, you just apply and interview and that's it. So if any of you have like an idea you think is worth sharing, just apply. It's free to apply, guys. You should do it. And I think the biggest challenge for me was like many of us are used to standing on a stage. I think so that wasn't a huge deal for me, but oh my goodness, memorizing like 20 minutes of speech was intense. So I've never had to do that in my music kind of applications and performance. But
How
Yeah,
long did it take
I think
you,
it
to
pushes you.
prepare?
It actually is pretty quick. Like it happened, like I think in a span of maybe like less than half a year. But yeah, writing it took a lot of time, because I'm not a speaker by trade or by professional training. I did have help from some friends. I have one of my church friends is a high school teacher for English, so I'm like, mate, can you read over my script? So yeah, you can work on things like that. But yeah, memorizing was really hard, but it's always good to like push yourself into like things beyond your comfort zone. I think it helps me as a teacher to remember what it feels like to do things that like I'm not super comfortable with. So as students, we're asking students to do this all the time, but we're kind of like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for years. And it's good to just be a bit like, oh, what am I doing? And how do I overcome this challenge? And yeah, so I thought that was really good for me as personal development. But the process itself, honestly, it's not super it helps if you're super opinionated like me, but it's great because you just talk and no one talks back to you and you get like 18 minutes on that red dot. And but yeah, I think, look, honestly, some of the talks you scroll through in TEDx, some you'll be like, oh, that's great, some you'll be like, that's rubbish. And yeah, if you're going to have a strong opinion about anything, there will be backlash, there'll be people who disagree with you, but I hope that what this TED talk brought about is just a prompt. And people can have their own conversations like, oh, hey, did you watch that video? And they can share their own experiences. And I feel like one thing I wanted to point out is that, I had this whole, oh, you should record yourself and document progress. But, maybe other people out there have better suggestions and better ideas. And if we can just like start the conversation and then, we can all share, and it's always going to benefit the next generation of musicians. So yeah, that's what I'm really hoping that the TED Talk will achieve. Yeah.
What a great way to wrap things up. Thank you very much for that. Where can people go to find out more about you and your teaching or your studio or your talk?
Yeah, I have a website, so just www.serenamak.com. On socials, I have Facebook and Instagram, so just Serena Mak Music, all one word. I have to let you know, though, my updates and posts are rare and limited, like high designer fashion. So, yeah, so
I like that connection.
I'm more mysterious.
And it's Serena Mak, M-A-K, for those of you.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been wonderful to hang out.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for having me.
Hi everyone, I wanted to take a moment to let you know about an amazing community of music teachers ready to welcome you over at Top Music Pro. Top Music Pro is the global hub for music teachers looking to connect, learn, grow, and be challenged in both their teaching and studio businesses. Community members save time by accessing hundreds of step-by-step lesson plans, creative teaching frameworks, business guides, online courses, and workshops. We offer training in topics as diverse as music technique, lead sheets, website building, intermediate repertoire, group teaching, and special needs teaching. We also save you money through our extensive discounts, including those with Music Notes, Sheet Music Plus, Music Room, Office Depot, Tonebase, and many more. And if you like sheet music, all our members get a free book of studio licensed, beautifully engraved sheet music each and every month. As a valued podcast listener, you can check out the Top Music Pro community free for 14 days by heading to topmusicpro.com, clicking Join Now on our studio tier, and using the special coupon code IMTPOD23. That's all one word. So that's IMTPOD23. We can't wait to welcome you inside. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Serena. And remember, we've been sharing lots and lots of resources on our blog and over on our YouTube channel, and also on the podcast in the last 4 weeks or so. So do go and check those out over at topmusic.co if you haven't already. And over on the Guitar Podcast this week, episode 39 features the fantastic Mike Grundy, who's been a regular on this show as well. Episode number 39 is all about managing multiple music schools with successful Amazon side hustles for guitar teachers. Go and check that out over at topmusic.co/guitar039 or find the Top Music Guitar Podcast on any of your favorite podcast players. Well, that's the end of the show for this week. Thanks again for joining us. It's been wonderful to be spending some time with you. Next week on the podcast, we are looking into performance anxiety. It's one of those things that comes up all the time when we think about performance opportunities, but particularly exams for students, because they can be a very anxious time for students. So we're going to be talking with, yes, the one and only, the bulletproof musician, Mr. Performance Anxiety Solutions himself, Dr. Noah Kageyama. That's all coming up in next week's episode. I look forward to speaking to you then. This is the Integrated Music Teaching Podcast from Top Music, and I'm Tim Topham. Speak to you next time. How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support, and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today. If you enjoy this show and want to hear more of our work, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening today. For links and resources mentioned in this episode, visit us at topmusic.co/podcast or check out the show notes. I'm Tim Topham, and this is the Integrated Music Teaching Podcast, a production of Top Music. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy your week ahead, and I'll catch you next time.